So let's begin. So, Humayra, we're really curious to hear more about you and what you do in the tech space. So please let us know, you know, where you work, how'd you get involved in that, and yeah.
Firstly, thank you guys so much for having me. Super excited to be part of this and super excited to be involved in a Goals in Tech project. I've been following you guys on LinkedIn for some time. So I am a legal associate at DLA Piper, DLA Piper South Africa. It's a leading global law firm. I am in the intellectual property and technology space. But really, my bread and butter is telecommunications, data privacy, surveillance laws, cyber crimes, e-commerce, which is also a big part of what we do, advertising and media law. So on a day-to-day, my tasks range from advising global and multinational companies who are looking to set up shop in South Africa, who are looking to launch telecommunications services in South Africa. From a compliance perspective, of course, there's a lot that goes into that, which I know Joe must know a lot about. And from a local company perspective or a local telecoms perspective, any mobile network operators looking to launch new products in the market or any disputes they're having, any compliance issues they're having. We advise a lot of streaming platforms with their launch in South Africa or any ongoing engagements with the Film and Publication Board. We do a lot of e-commerce work, so that's anything from just general consumer protection requirements, reviewing contracts from that perspective, including from a data protection perspective. And there's honestly just so much more, but that's just to give you a little bit of a flavor. My role really does require me to be very on top of what's going on in the legal space, of course, because tech is such an incredibly dynamic space, but also the news and the market. And that's obviously the market both globally and locally, because we need to know what's going on, what are the new developments, how does it affect our clients, how does it affect their businesses, because we always want to make sure we're giving our clients very practical, very commercial tech advice, because it doesn't really help to just sort of spew the law back at them. We try to make tech law, which can be an incredibly difficult and niche space, digestible for our clients, for anyone who's interested in the space, really. And yeah, we also do a lot of business development where we try to condense the tech laws and make it palatable and explain it in very sort of layperson terms. And then, of course, it's the usual lawyer tasks on top of that. So admin.com, but that's every job I know. Drafting, research, training, and that's basically my day in a nutshell.
Definitely doesn't sound like a nutshell. Wow, you are really good. When people talk about like legal tech, was it tech legal to get the phrase correct? And you mentioned intellectual property. We hear about it, but having you unpack it and break it down into all the different facets, it really, I think I've gotten a better understanding of what it entails and understanding how dynamic the space is that you work in. So I'm sure you never have the same day twice. It must be super interesting and very exciting. And like you said, very dynamic. Awesome.
Yes.
So talk about this and, being in a space that's so dynamic. And you were talking about the fact that, you work on all these projects, all these initiatives, and then you still have to keep abreast of what's happening in the news, what's happening in the markets, etc. What do you think? Is there any one thing in particular that contributed in you getting to where you are right now?
Definitely training and mentorship. I think one can never underestimate the value of good training and just like good old-fashioned training and mentorship and having people who are vested in your growth and your development and who see the potential in you and actually nurture it. I mean, of course, it requires you to bring 100% to the table, but I've been really, really fortunate since the very onset of my legal career, which started at Bowmans, where I just had the privilege of having access to all these great legal minds on all different levels who took the time to invest in me. And thankfully, a lot of my training was done pre-COVID. So I didn't have that barrier of having a screen, which is not the worst thing, but sometimes, you know, that FaceTime really does make a difference. Just having people teach me, talk me through all the things that I needed to learn, being able to ask the stupid questions, being a rookie at something, being able to also watch and observe how things are done and then implement that in my day to day. It's taught me so much. It's also helped me to have a very full perspective of what it is to be a well-rounded lawyer, which I hope I am and I hope I'm becoming. And I've been very fortunate as well from a mentorship perspective to work under a woman in the tech space, a very fierce woman at that. And that has helped with soft skills as well. So in as much as we need, you know, our core skills that we require in our jobs, the legal acumen, the business acumen, all of that is definitely super important. But the soft skills that come with that and in navigating the spaces we're in, especially as a woman and especially as a woman of color, we definitely need all the little things to help us navigate that, like being assertive and not being scared to be assertive. All of that came in with the mentorship that I've received. So definitely those two things, and I hope that we can all always just pass the ladder back down anytime that we get the chance to.
Well, I think that's a really important thing. I mean, most of the women we speak to do mention that, you know, having other women to look up to does make a huge difference in shaping, you know, their careers. But also on that note, and also on what Joe had mentioned, what exactly did you study, or what was your process to getting where you are? I mean, I don't think, well, I'm not sure. Can you study tech law at varsity? Some of those soft skills which you learned in the workplace, I mean, what were you practically doing in varsity? Was it helping you achieve that? You know, in the educational context, are there a lot of women to look up to?
So I studied for, well, you know, Rydia, for a very, very long time. I mean, not that long, but long for me anyway. When I look back, I'm like, what was I thinking? But I started off with a Bachelor of Arts. I did major in law, but I really just, I wanted to get a flavor for other things like psychology and international relations. I mean, who doesn't want to still live their life straight out of high school, right? So I did a BA, and then I did my LLB, and then I did my LLM in corporate law. At the time, and it's still currently the case at Wits, because that is where I studied, as I understand it. There is a cyber law course that is on offer, and that can also be accessed even if you just want to do a postgraduate diploma. So you definitely don't need to go the master's route for that. And it is more accessible and more affordable, definitely, if you just go with a postgraduate diploma. There definitely is access to some form of tech law at certain universities. But what I will say is this: no matter how much you study it in theory or what is covered in theory, it is so far away from how it looks in practice. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just goes to show you, A, how dynamic the space actually is on the ground, and B, just how many moving parts there are and how insanely commercial it all gets, which I find exciting. But I think if you're somebody who's more academically driven and you still want to be in the tech space, then perhaps a more lecturing role is more suited to you. Versus if you're somebody who likes the business element married with the tech element, then I think a tech law space is a beautiful space to be in, because it's really transactions, advice, litigation sometimes. You know, it's quite a hybrid little space. But I think that we are getting better, well, certainly from the universities I've seen, with modernizing curriculum and trying to make it more relevant. Like, I think AI and cyber law and data protection and e-commerce. These things are coming up a little bit more. And I am aware that universities have actually been asked to start including more of this in the syllabus. So it's left to be seen. I think it's a slow process, but that has definitely gotten me, at least got me through the door at Bowmans. And of course, I attribute much of that to a lot of privilege and a lot of access to opportunity, which I know I have. And I try to always be cognizant of that wherever I go. But I think from a soft skills perspective, you know, the research skills that you learn and you develop, just the ability to think critically, the ability to apply the law back, all those skills definitely help you and have helped me in the working space. But from a soft skills perspective, I think there were certain things that life taught me, like not university, just life itself. And then, of course, the mentorship aspect and the training aspect. There are incredible women in the academia space. Well, certainly the women that I engaged with when I did my master's, for example, my supervisors were both women. There are incredible women in the space. I didn't have access to women in tech. Which is very funny, because when I started my legal career doing my articles, I didn't even know that there was a thing called tech law. I had no clue that there was a tech space for me in law. I went in with an open mind, thinking I'm going to become a corporate lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions, which forms a big part of what you do at a corporate law firm, no matter which department you're in. But it just so happened that the universe worked that way, where I landed up in tech and I just fell in love and landed up going back to it and stayed there. And so I think what would do well is if more people knew what was actually out there, and more women knew just what is actually out there and what's on offer and how they can get there. But I think my biggest advice in that regard would be to keep an open mind, because you never know what's behind the door. And it just takes a little knock and a little bit of broad-mindedness, and you land up in a good position.
I love that. I love that about being open-minded, and awareness is so key. I think,
key.
that is the first step. When you become aware, then you have choice and you can decide what you'd like to do.
Absolutely.
You were speaking about mentorship earlier, and I know that there's a lot of talk about mentorship at this point in time. Companies have mentorship programs. Organizations like ours, Girls in Tech, has a mentorship program. And I think I'd just like to ask you maybe a very practical question around it, because sometimes our lives are busy, right? And sometimes people wonder, how do they fit mentorship in? So maybe if you could share in your journey how you fitted the mentorship into your life. And one other key thing that I find is there needs to be a level of trust that's built up with your mentor, which is quite important, right? And that takes time. So I wonder if you could share just maybe some of your experience, some of your insights with our Girls in Tech members, just so they get a feel of how to go about it.
No problem. I mean, that's a great question, and so true about how busy we get and doing it all. And as women, don't we know the challenge of trying to fit everything in and still stay sane at the end of every day? So definitely. I think as a starting point, I think I will say this, is that mentorship should always be organic. I've seen, how it goes when you try force a mentee and a mentor together, and they don't necessarily have the best chemistry or the best rapport. And I think that's the starting point of it, is having rapport and developing that rapport, because that's what builds the trust. I know in my experience, at least as a mentee, my boss, and it's Boss's Day, so happy Boss's Day to her. But my boss and I, the way it really began is it was all quite organic. It was just me and her developing rapport, touching base with her, sitting in our office, frantically writing notes while she spoke volumes of knowledge, incredible knowledge, and imparted that knowledge to me in the tech legal space. And just being curious to learn from her. That was number one. And number two was I think her realizing she could trust me and depend on me from a work perspective, and then me realizing I can trust her to give me the feedback I need, to give me the advice I need in my career, which she did, and to guide me and help me navigate as I go along. And that in turn that symbiosis created so much room for trust, for conversation, and our relationship developed to such a point where when she decided to leave Bowmans and join DLA, I joined with her. And that's how I think, I mean, obviously your boss doesn't need to be your mentor. Your mentor can be out of your boss, your sponsor, your mentor. They can all be different people. But I think the important thing is conversation, rapport, transparency, and having a sense of natural and organic connection. And that's not something that can necessarily be taught, but it is something that can be felt. And I think as women, we are very attuned to that. We can immediately tell when something just isn't quite clicking with us or isn't quite working for us. And so we need to be honest and have those conversations. Let's say I'm paired with you, Joe, and you're my mentor, and we're not clicking. One of us should be able to just say to each other, you know what? I have tons of respect for you and I appreciate your time, but I think our time would be better served if we're honest with each other and we agree up front that, you know, maybe this isn't working, and we explore. And I think that's another thing. Younger people need to be keen also, and older people, but younger people need to be keen to explore different mentors in different people and different spaces, even if it's not necessarily the space you are in, because that really, it goes back to that open-mindedness. It really like opens doors and windows and all of the above. So I think that's that. And then on the time aspect, that is just one of those things. We just have to be so intentional about it and so deliberate about it. Even me at my level, which is still quite junior, I try my best. And I mean, I definitely was, you know, better at this when I wasn't in such an adjustment phase as I am now, having joined a new company. But just to be so deliberate and so intentional about setting aside that hour or that hour and a bit, or even if it's 30 minutes a day, to touch base with whoever's working with you on projects and on things, just to make sure that it's not just giving instructions, it's touching base with them as people, making sure that they feel supported and valued and appreciated, that they have the tools and the resources that they need to absolutely thrive in whatever it is, because really that benefits you at the end of the day. So the way I see it is that investment of my time has a return on it. And I think we should learn to view mentorship as beneficial on both sides. And that, I think, will make a difference. It's not a one-sided thing.
Well, I can relate to the whole aspect of, you know, it's an investment you want to make, and it's something you have to be open, you know, in both directions. And I think that's something we prioritize at Girls in Tech. It's really, okay, I may not be the best mentor for someone, or I don't recognize someone as the correct mentee for me, but being open to share our networks, to connecting people which we think, you know, could really benefit from each other. And that touches back on, you know, being open-minded, like you did mention, as like your number one lesson. So with that in mind, I mean, you had to be open-minded to even consider tech law, something you didn't even know existed before you entered the working world. So, you know, just on a parting note, why would you advise girls to get involved in tech?
Well, it's a couple of things. I think number one, and from my observation, there's definitely a shortage of skills in the space, in the tech law space. There are so few of us in this little niche space that I can't wait for the day where I just see more women in tech, more girls in tech and in tech law. You know, we not even just tech law. We need more women as engineers, programmers, developers, coders, tech lawyers, all of the above. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's a very niche space. There's such an empowering and liberating feeling with being an expert in this tiny little field where there's so few of us operating. And many people don't even know that we exist and what it is that we do and the impact we have on clients' businesses, but it's for us, it's this very fulfilling, very liberating, very empowering feeling. The third thing is it's a very sustainable space because tech's not going anywhere. So I think the longevity of a career in anything tech, but especially tech law, it's going to be there, and it's going to change with time, and it's going to look differently as we go along, but it will be there. And last but not least is definitely, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's such an incredibly dynamic space. You're never bored. You really are never bored. Every day you are learning something new. You're teaching yourself something new, and you're curious all the time because it's like, okay, well, today the law has changed. Let's go learn about that. And it really affects the work you do, and your clients want to know about it, and everybody's scrambling to know about it. And guess what? You're the only one who knows about it. So it's a cool space. It really just, it's a vibe. That's what I'll say. So that is, yeah, that I encourage, I really implore and encourage girls from any walks of life to just be curious about it and at least look into it. If law is not your thing, or traditional law spaces are not your thing, just know that there are non-traditional legal spaces like the tech legal space where you can do very, very, very interesting work and be very excited about it all.
Well, thank you for sharing. I didn't introduce any of us properly, but it was really nice to talk to you both. The brilliant Joe. Having a conversation with you was so enlightening. I felt like, we weren't interviewing you, but you left us with some really thought-provoking questions. And speaking to my sister, who's a really great tech lawyer, kind of felt like I was receiving life advice like any other day. And I work so far from law, so it's always nice to hear, something so entirely different from what I do. So thank you both, and I'm sure this will leave a lot of young girls with, a lot of valuable insights on what they can do in their lives, and maybe you've excited a whole generation of future tech lawyers to come. So thank you.
I hope so. Thank you for having me. It was great to meet you, Joe. Thank you. And nice to
Thank you
speak with
so
you.
much. It was wonderful chatting with both of you. I really hope that, like you were sharing, Humayra, that when people watch this video, they listen just for awareness, because just hearing something different changes one part of the system, changes, the whole system. So I think it will be quite impactful.
I couldn't have said it better. Yes. Thank you both. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys. Enjoy your evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.